Hi, welcome back to High on Utah. This is Heather Groom. And I just want to talk to you today about nightly rental properties or Airbnbs, like we usually refer to them. And I get a lot of questions about how to make them very successful. So today I made a list of the top 5 things to do to create an amazing, profitable Airbnb. And what I mean by that is, again, just whenever I say Airbnb, it also can mean short term rental or nightly rental. So let's just kind of kick off right away because there are things that you can do that don't cost a lot of money that are important to notice and plan for when you are designing up your Airbnb. So, first of all, let me just talk. I took some notes on my phone, so hopefully I can read them. But the first one I want to talk about is create an eye catching listing. And because there's so much competition in this space, it used to be when I first got into Airbnb, maybe almost 20 years ago, that there weren't as many nightly rentals. And so you could kind of just put anything on market and it would rent and it would be fine. And people had older furniture in it. Maybe it wasn't as nice. They'd take some photos on their cell phone, they'd upload them, and they'd list and they'd still rent it and it would be okay. There was a major shift that happened during COVID. And during COVID, people decided, hey, I want to get out of my house because they were stuck inside their homes for a while. And so they started to look for nicer places. They started to say, you know what? Instead of just having some beat up couch or just beds in here, I want something where, maybe they have games or an Xbox or other expectations. And so, kind of the level and expectation, I would say, changed among consumers for Airbnbs kind of during that COVID time. And so, if you had a nicer, like, property or listing, if you had better photos, you stood out more and you rented really well. There were times during COVID, like during 2020, 2021, where my places were 95% occupied. Like one of them was like almost 100% occupied. And so we started to dive in on like what was that determining factor. And so I started to really ask questions like, what are the things that we're doing, or when I'm looking at a successful Airbnb, what are the things or the criteria? What are the talking points? What are the things that are making a difference? And so I want to talk first about just when you're creating your listing. Don't just have, your next door neighbor or your kid make it up and throw some words, in, but you've got to really plan for it. So do really good photography, and I would hire a very good photographer and get a few different pictures during all times of the day as well. So you want to have really bright photos for the interior on the inside. It needs to be really welcoming. I even repainted the walls inside one of my Airbnbs because I felt like they looked a little too gray of paint. I now paint my walls, almost all of it is white. And I also use like cashmere paint. By the way, I'm going to get really molecular on some stuff on this podcast episode. I use cashmere paint from Sherwin-Williams because you can paint over it really easily and it doesn't create a different sheen. And so I painted it white and I got a good photographer to come in, take really good pictures, make them really bright. She used a separate flash when she took the pictures. And then I had her come at different times of the day for the backyard. And then I also had her Photoshop in a sunset for some vibey pictures, right? And so I have a private swimming pool at one of my Airbnbs, and I had her do like a sunset picture and made it just look really cool. I also added cafe lights on the exterior around the patio because, hey, who doesn't love cafe lights? I love cafe lights. And so they look just really cool. And so it made my pictures really stand out above other people's pictures. I also got bright, even just, the interior. Again, I turned on like lamps. I turned on a lot of light and I just made sure my photos were amazing. So first, make this eye-catching listing is probably one of your first priorities. I also started to look in different markets at very expensive Airbnbs and I read the descriptions. And I started to look, and I know a lot of people put it in Chat GPT, which is great. It's a good starter, but you don't want it to sound like chat. You've got to make sure it sounds like you're talking to them, that there's a person behind it, not just a big management company. It needs to sound really personal and add in very specific details about your listing, about the area. Um, I like to talk about landmarks and just saying we are 3 miles to the Costco. I know that sounds funny, but just even having that information, most people want to be near a Costco because they come into town, they pick up all their groceries, and then they, stay at the Airbnb most of the time. Then maybe they leave, but they're cooking at home. So that's kind of part of the listing, I would say, is just be really detailed on landmarks, how far things are, a super Walmart, for example. Your photos, make sure your description doesn't sound like ChatGPT, be very specific. I'm always surprised when I go and I read these descriptions at how many people don't even really talk about the occupancy or the configurations in the rooms of how many people can sleep in what rooms. And so you want to be very detailed. Like, no one's ever going to complain about a very detailed listing. Just don't be verbose, and you can just make very good bullet points about, like I was saying, like landmarks or things that it's near, but just make sure that it's very readable as well and inviting. Because if it just drones on and it's a lot of word garbage, they also get bored with that. But your first 5 pictures are the most important. So you need to make sure that your first 5 pictures are bright, they look different, and they're very inviting. So that's number one. And again, reread your description and make sure it sounds awesome. So number two, I would say, and it's kind of a mistake people make, is they tend to pick very boring furniture, very boring accent pieces. They think hotel room, for example, and they'll just pick some kind of, I call it blobby art, where it's just maybe a blob of paint with a swirl. And that's fine. It's not that that's bad. But, it's like if you're going to southern Utah, consider putting things that have bright colors, maybe some pictures with like a cactus, right? Or the really popular ones right now are kind of these longhorn steers, right? Um, just things that are maybe very southwestern. Maybe get some sunset pictures, because we get guests from even all over the world, or a lot of people like East Coast and other areas where it's different. And so have fun with it. Most people don't have enough fun when they're putting this together. They tend to choose things that they would put in their primary residence. They go with like a plain gray couch or a white couch, which, by the way, don't do a white couch in an Airbnb because there will be kids with Cheetos. So you've got to kind of be smart about those choices as well. But like, I have a navy blue couch in one of mine. I have a green couch in one of mine that's just really funny. And I've got like a cactus pillow. Just have fun with it. And so be really bright on colors, because that will also make your photography also look better. And so right now, if you even just kind of have just like a blah listing, this is something you can do right now that is so easy. Just go pick up some new throw pillows. I go to Home Goods, just buy some really bright ones, some fun things. Look on Amazon. I like to go a little bit, like I said, kind of like a Southwestern, but fun. You could do like a Southwestern contemporary. You could do, so it's more modern. It doesn't have to be cliche, if that makes sense. It's not like you need like things that have sheriff badges, or like, pioneer wagons or something like that. It's not like that. You could do a really classy, like Southwest modern, or you could do something that maybe like I have this one Airbnb right now that has desert watercolors. So it's kind of like paintings, but really cool relaxing but interesting, and they're made out of like the watercolors, and so it's really pretty. But just kind of have fun. Don't be afraid to be unique because again, when somebody's flipping through the listings, I'm always surprised at how many listings look exactly the same. And especially if you've got a property management company, a lot of times they're using the same photographer to go take everybody's photos. And sometimes they can look a lot alike. And so it's nice to kind of shake it up. And most of the property management companies will even allow you to do your own photos if you want. So you may want to consider hiring a different photographer and then do different amenity photos as well. Like some people say, oh, we have a community pool, but they don't really put pictures in of the community pool. So make sure you have some of those. Or like if it's near Zion National Park, put in a picture of Zion National Park. You know, one of the pictures that I also put on all of my listings is a car charger in the garage. I actually take a picture of the charger just so people know what they need to bring if they're coming over, maybe from Vegas and they have a Tesla or whatever it might be. And so those are just little things, but I like to add that in. I also take pictures sometimes of like my pantry of all the appliances that are inside the pantry. So that way they can see there's a rice cooker, they can see there's a crock pot, they can see there's an air fryer. And so I like to do photos of some of those features because that means a lot to people, especially if they're hosting a larger, group of people. Like in one of my Airbnbs with the private pool, I have two waffle makers. And the reason I have two waffle makers is because a lot of times they have a lot of teenagers. And so I've got, I have a picture of both of those waffle makers in there. So you want to make sure you're highlighting some of those unique features and don't just, have blah pictures. Like again, they've got to really stand out. Um, and then the number three, let's go to the next point. Um, I would say unique features. I just kind of touched on that, but I take a picture of like the Xbox, for example. I have an Xbox in every single one of my homes. I also have like a stand-up Pac-Man game, which people love because you can do two-player on it. Okay, I gotta admit, I love it too because I'm a child of the '80s, right? So Brent and we love to kind of verse each other in Pac-Man, and I won't say who wins, but anyway. But I'm just saying that's something fun, right? And I have a picture of that. I have a putting green in two of my Airbnbs, just really fun. And so I have a few pictures of the putting green and even like one that's the putting green at sunset as well. And people love that. And again, some of these things cost more money, clearly. A hot tub always, I'll just say it usually pays for itself very quickly because typically you can get $100 more a night for a hot tub. And so when you start adding that up, that pays for itself really quickly. So I have different pictures. And then we also will stage pictures. So in one of my Airbnbs that I have that I just actually put online recently, I put out like table place settings on the outdoor table. So instead of just having a blah table, we put out like place settings with napkins and opened up the hot tub and turned on the colors of the lights inside. And we also turned on the pool lights. And so that way people could see it just looked fun and different, right? And so people are willing to pay more now for those things, whether it's a pool, a hot tub, different games. I have a client who has set up her Airbnb and has a loft and has like games on the walls and then like shelves of games. And so people that love games, they come to her place because they have a fun table area, but there's almost like a theme in the loft of game playing, which is really cool. And I've got another client who his brother is an artist. And so he painted pictures for every room in the house. And they're kind of contemporary, they're kind of different and it works. But he rents his Airbnb probably about 30% more often than some of his neighbors just because it's different. It's almost like they're staying in a museum, right? I have another client who she had this old bike that was her grandfather's and she hung it in the stairwell. And like there's like literally a bike like hanging there. It's really cool. And then she had kind of unique biking photos and things in the house that was really interesting. And again, hers rents really well because of that. So you don't have to always choose an actual theme, but it's fun to add some unique contrast pieces or things in there that are memorable, and then when people go to book again, they also remember your house. So it's also important to do that. So definitely highlight those unique features. And that could be like pool, hot tub. I also forgot to mention like a fire pit. A lot of times we have fire pits, or like a gazebo, an outdoor dining area. Those are all great. And then stage some of those photos also of, maybe have a game sitting out on a table, so people know kind of what they can do there. Then number four, I'm going to just say the other point on this that is really important for making sure your Airbnb is profitable is you need to understand and know your calendar. And different areas of Utah, for example, have different calendars of high peak season. So, for example, if you're in Park City, obviously ski season is going to be your most busy, profitable time of year that usually offsets your summer. So I do a lot of work in Park City, but I know that calendar, even down to the week. Like I know which weekends are even more popular. There's also software like AirDNA, there's other places. And, I'd like to say those give us a pattern or an idea of what to ask. There's different ways. And if you have a management company, they're going to help you with setting the rate because they're incentivized to make sure you're making money as well. But just know you need to kind of play around with the pricing because depending on what's in town, like if it's the Ironman competition, then we know we can charge, double what we normally charge, for example. We also know that April and October are really big months in St. George. Those are two of the biggest, busiest months, spring and fall. A lot of people come out and they love it. And so, you've got to know those calendars because some people, they assume because they want to use their Airbnb in January, they say, oh, it must be a busy month. And actually, January is one of the slower months, which works out great for me because it's when I can go in, I can stay at my place, I can avoid the blizzards up on the, Wasatch Front. And then also I go down and that's when I do some of the maintenance as well. So it still is owning a home, you still have things to do. So I'll go in there, I'll do paint touch ups, I do deep cleans, I might install a ceiling fan. There's just little things that I can do. I also can then, depending on, I always say talk to your accountant, but, sometimes you can write that off as like a deep clean. Sometimes you can write off your trips if you're doing maintenance on your house. So know your calendar because you don't necessarily want to use your place on the busiest weekend of the year. If it's spring break and you could get double the rent, that's something to think about because, it does matter. So pay attention to the calendar, know when that is. And the other thing you can do is if you're just starting an Airbnb, run some specials. Like you could do a promo where maybe it's, stay for 3 nights, get a fourth night free or 50% off or whatever it might be. Maybe give them a discount code for a cleaning. There's for a longer stay, sometimes we incentivize people to do week-long stays. And so there's ways that you can do specials. But you can once you get those reviews going, most people, they want to see about 2 or 3 reviews at a minimum because they feel like at least at 2 or 3 that somebody has stayed in your house, and they feel a little confident. Sometimes they feel a little uncomfortable if they don't see any reviews at all. And so you really want to get your first reviews. Like when I started my Airbnb, anytime that I pick up a new Airbnb, I run a special on it because I want to get quick reviews. And that way I'll do like, maybe the 2 and 3 night special. And then that way I have my reviews within 3 weeks. And then that way I know that my calendar is going to book up really quickly. So, kind of play around with that as well. My last point, number 5, and I touched on this just now, is just getting the reviews, but being fast with your communication because people do expect to, if they are asking you a question, and especially if they're looking at renting, because if it's something that maybe they need to check with you first on reserving it, if your response time is slow, they've already looked at another 10 listings. And if somebody else has something interesting, they're going to forget about yours in the time they've messaged you. If they don't have a response, they're going to already be looking back and saying, oh, well, you know what? I actually just found this other one and this looks good and I can, kind of buy it now is what I call it, but book it now, like an instant booking. And one of the things I like doing, this is just from my own experience, is that I have noticed that I do like the longer bookings because that's usually at a higher price point, and I tend to have people that take care of my house more and keep it clean. It sounds really funny, but the short stays, a lot of people think, "Oh, well, they're just renting it for one night or two night." I actually don't allow that. I rarely will have a two-night allowance. I have a minimum of 3 nights for booking, and some weekends, if it's a popular weekend like fall break, I can do a 4 night minimum. There's ways that you can kind of play around with that because I don't want somebody to come in and book that house for only 2 or 3 days and then burn the other important days because then I'm not going to get a booking, right, for as long. So that's why you need to know the calendar. But also, it's important because, um, again, kind of going back to that communication piece, you want those people to come back. If they were a good renter, then there are people that we have contact us every year because, like, we have one that he comes out with some buddies and they do like golfing for a whole week. And they've been coming to our place probably for 5, 6 years in a row, and they like to be there on an off weekend that isn't a very popular weekend. I know they take good care of the house. I love that. And what we may do is leave them a little welcome basket, or like we try to be very good on our communication. We may even discount their cleaning fee or something just because we like having them back. And so that means a lot to them. And a lot of people, they just want ease of use. Once they start coming to one place, and if they know it works for them, like if they know the configuration works, they're going to just keep coming back because it's just easy for them. I call it make it less brain damage for them. And so even make sure you're using your brand, like your name of your house. Like I have one of my Airbnbs is called Starry Night. And, I'll say thank you again for booking Starry Night. And I'll just use that name over and over because I want them to remember it and I want them to come back. And again, when somebody's looking at booking, if they're asking you a question, you've got to be right on top of it. Your response rate, if it is slow, if it's within like even 1 or 2 hours, that's slow. So if you can have really good communication, that matters. And again, the reason going back to the beginning of even photos and the reason photos are important is because you want them to look at your listing, you want them to love it, and you want them to book it. And you want them to just already be moving forward because you don't want them to be looking at the other 100 listings that are similar to your listing. And so just make sure that you're hitting all those areas. But if you do those things, if you hit those 5 areas, you will be successful in your Airbnb. As a side note, too, I'm going to maybe bring up a sixth point, which is going to be furniture. And it's not that it matters for the booking, but it does matter for return clients because they want to make sure that your beds are comfortable, that they can sleep there. Because sometimes they'll look at an Airbnb, like think of when you've booked a hotel, it looks really good. This just happened to me. I booked a really nice hotel, it looked great, a good brand of hotel, a Marriott, and the beds were very uncomfortable. And I thought, I don't want to come back to this. Or I stayed at another Marriott and they had this like bright red and black wallpaper. It was supposed to be really contemporary, but it was just so distracting that it wasn't relaxing. And I thought, I'm not going to go back to that hotel. And so you've got to remember that you want to target those people that again are going to take care of your place. They're going to book longer stays, and they're going to come back. And so those are the key things to remember. But just remember, furniture like mattresses matter. Also, if like your couch is comfortable, do they have the right? Do you have the right kitchen things? Like I was mentioning, just like two waffle irons, or enough pans or enough plates. I'm surprised at how often I go into an Airbnb and they don't have enough plates. For all the occupants. I'm like, well, how are, you say you sleep 18 people, but you have 12 plates, So those kind of things, you need to make sure everything is in alignment, and that is also very easy to replicate as well, and to bring people back, because they will come back. And the other thing they'll do is they'll even recommend that house to friends. So we've had other people that have said, I stayed at this house, I really liked it. And then they'll send the link to a friend, and then their friend will book as well. And they'll say, hey, they were good hosts. They responded quickly to my questions. And so that worked out great. So those are the things that really matter. And right now, because Airbnb is growing, there have been a lot of people that have purchased nightly rentals. You've got to be able to stand out, and you've got to be successful, because I work with a lot of people that call me, and sometimes they say, oh, well, I used my leftover basement furniture in the house, and they're wondering why they're not renting very often. And I'm like, well, maybe your basement furniture wasn't that great. Or, what would you want to stay here? Does this have all the things that make you want to stay? So even down to maybe putting in a few kid toys. Like I go to like Ross or TJ Maxx or wherever, and I'll put a few little kid toys in. I'll put a few hard books in there. Again, you want to be able to have things for all age groups as well. And again, it doesn't have to be full of stuff necessarily. It just has to be the right things and the right configurations, easy to use, easy to book, and make it easy for them to come back. Because having that consistency, I love it when I've got good renters that come back often. It's like I'm like cheering. I'm like, yay, that's one of my favorite renters that's going to be in the house. So those things matter. And right now, with it being more of a hyper competitive market, every dollar matters. So just these small little things that you can do right now mean a lot. And especially, I would say, start with photography, kind of going back to our first points, because if your pictures are not great, they're going to flip through your listing. You're going to have less than 5 seconds with that person. And so you've got to be able to make an impression right from the beginning with those photos, and make them want to dig in deeper into your listing. So, anyway, I hope that was helpful today, and thanks for tuning in.